Alrighty, good afternoon. My name is Ryan Falquist. I'm Technical Specialist with the Center for Instructional Technology here at Ivy Tech Community College. Joined today by Ari Sowers. She is from Respondus. She's the Director of Training. We have worked together for several years. Respondus and Ivy Tech have been partners for, I don't know, I've been with the college 10 years, and I want to say for all 10 years we've worked with Respondus. So we've been longtime partners with them. We primarily, the two products that we utilize with Respondus is Lockdown Browser and then Respondus 4.0. So that's what we'll be talking about in this webinar is Respondus 4.0 and teaching faculty how to create exams and just all the nifty tools and everything that you can do that goes along with Respondus 4.0. So I'll just, without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Ari.
Great, thanks Ryan. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. So, as Ryan said, the first part we're going to talk about how to create and manage exam content with Respondus 4.0. It is an authoring tool that lets you write your test and quiz questions and publish them into Canvas. So a quick agenda, or sorry, this is the overview of what Respondus 4.0 is. As Ryan said, we've been around at Respondus, and this is our flagship application. This is actually our 18th year of existence. So you guys have been partners and clients for more than half of that. So that's wonderful. We're glad that this has been so useful for everybody. So anyway, Respondus 4.0, as we call it, is the application that helps you write and manage your tests, publish them into your online courses. It works in an offline Windows-based environment that we'll see in a moment. So it's actually a separate application that I'm going to pull up, a little client that sits on your computer, your desktop. And what we're going to cover today is how to use that to quickly create quizzes, how to manage content that you already have, things like Word documents, other file types, publisher test banks, if anybody uses the questions written by publishers that come with your textbooks. We'll talk about ways to edit the content that you have in Respondus 4, your quiz questions, things like using rich media and various formatting features. We'll talk about settings and then how to publish into Canvas. I'll ask if everyone, submit questions by chat. I think, Brian, that's what you asked, at any time, but I'll actually take all the questions at the end. There's a very good chance that I'm going to cover something that you ask a few minutes after you ask it. So just to make sure we don't repeat and use our time efficiently. And one thing I will say before I jump in is that Respondus 4.0 is a complement to the assessment tool that you have in Canvas. So it can't do anything that Canvas can't do. In other words, if there's a quiz question you wish Canvas have, I'm sorry, but Respondus 4.0 can't help you with that. What it does is, its goal is to try to make things a little bit easier for those of us who prefer to work offline, for those of us who've been using Respondus 4.0 for a long time or have been using other learning management systems, and sometimes working in the assessment tool in your LMS is more cumbersome for some people. It also makes it really easy to translate different content types, like Word documents, or if you're even pulling in a quiz from another learning management system, perhaps at a previous role, or if the institution has more than one for certain departments, it can help with those types of things. So this is what we'll cover today, and this will take us plenty of time. So I'm going to jump in and actually open the Respondus 4.0 application. So again, it's a client-based application. That means it gets installed to your computer. Ryan or the other folks at Ivy Tech can tell you how to get it if you don't have it installed already. Don't install it from our website because you all have what's considered an institution-wide license, therefore you have a special version of it. This is what it looks like as a desktop shortcut, a little round R for Respondus. And when we open it up, the first thing you're going to see is sort of the orientation of how the features are organized in Respondus 4. We have a couple tabs that go across the top with the different feature areas. As you can see, where the Start button is where we start. The Edit tab is where you create or edit. Oops, I need to have a file open first. Create or edit items. The Settings tab is where you apply, guess what, your settings. And then our Preview and Publish tab is where we're going to make sure the quiz questions look the way we want, publish them to Canvas, and there's a few other things in here too. On the Start tab, we have a whole bunch of buttons and wizards. We love wizards at Respondus because it'll walk you through the steps of what you need to do rather than you trying to figure it out. And as you can see, I can open an existing Respondus file from here. I can create a brand new one. I can also import from test banks, other Respondus files. I'm going to actually use the import wizard first as a place to start because the word import feature is probably tied with test banks as the most popular feature or functionality that Respondus 4.0 has. So this is the ability to take content, take quiz questions that you already have in a Word file or other types of files, import them into Respondus easily, and then publish them to Canvas. Because sometimes those learning system assessment tools don't have word import features, functions on their own, and Respondus 4 is the easiest way to do that. So I'm going to show you how to import first. In order to do that, though, and I'll open the wizard just to give you an idea of what we're about to do. There's really just 4 quick steps. 1 is to pick your file. 2 is to select where you want your file to go. The 3rd is to preview it, and the 4th is to finish it. But before we even do any of that, we need to format our source content, our file, our Word document. And you can see here, I've got a few different file types I can choose from. I'm going to pick docx because that's what I'm using. And the other thing I'll point out as we're getting into Word importing is this help button right here. There's also a question mark button that's present on every screen in Respondus 4.0. This is our user guide. It is long, it is detailed, but it's searchable, so you can just pick the content you want. It's also context sensitive, which means if I'm in the import feature, the import wizard here, and I click help, I'm going to go to the help for importing, right? So it's relevant to whatever the features I'm using. Now, the important thing to point out, if you've never imported from a Word document before, this is going to be your kind of Bible guide to using this Word import feature or any other file import feature, is this thing called the standard format for importing documents. These are all of the nitty-gritty details about exactly how to format your Word file so Respondus 4.0 can read it and translate it into Canvas quiz questions, because that's ultimately what we're doing. But I'm going to oversimplify this for the sake of today, just to make things move along and kind of just describe to you at a high level of what this really means is you're simply going to do things like number your questions like that. You're going to letter your answer choices if you have them. Not all question types have answer choices. We'll get into that in a moment. It will detail some of the optional elements that I'm not really going to use, but things like titles or feedback. You can include feedback with your questions, point values, things like that. So this guide here has all of that spelled out for you. I often think it's easier than just showing you the guide. I think it's easier to just show you a Word document. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to pop quickly over to where my desktop is, where I have a Word document that I've already formatted with a bunch of different things in it, so you can see how rich this could possibly be. And by the way, everything I can do in the Word document, I can do in Respondus 4 manually myself. I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. But just to start off, a pretty straightforward multiple choice question. Like I said before, you have to number the question, you put a blank space between the question and where your answers are going to live, letter your answer choices, and so on. And you might be asking what this asterisk here is for. Well, that's one of 2 ways to indicate correct answers. You could either put an asterisk next to the correct choice, or you can also use an answer key at the end of your file. So if I wanted to do that, I would simply put something like answers and then 1A, 2B, and so on and so on. Now that's just for straightforward multiple choice questions with just text in them. I mean, you can see I can format the text here a little bit. I got some bold and italicizing going on. But I can also use things like mathematical, scientific symbols, formulas, images can be embedded in the Word document if that's easier to work with, tables, charts, photos, flowcharts, all kinds of things can be included as that richer content in the question prompts or in the answer choices. Now, these are just multiple choice questions so far. When I get down to questions number 9 and 10, I'm seeing a couple other question types because, of course, not everybody gives only multiple choice questions as your assessment types. There's lots of other question types, right? So as an example, true, false, gets formatted exactly like multiple choice. It's just your choices are either T or F for true or false. If you wanted to do something like a fill in the blank or single answer question, and again, the help guide in the Respondus 4 application will tell you all of this. So don't feel like you have to memorize it or take notes right now. What you would do is you would tell Respondus, well, here comes another question type called F for fill in the blank. You would, put that text above the first question that is going to be that format, and then write your question. And instead of 4 answer choices of which only 1 is correct, in a fill in the blank type question, you're going to list all of the acceptable answers that are correct. So in this case, for those of you who know who René Descartes is, I'm going to accept a student who enters the full name, just the last name, a misspelled version of the last name, and the proper accented version of the name. So I've got a couple of ways that a student can get full points for this. This is also an example of how to add point values to your questions. If you don't put point values, it will do whatever you set as the default for the point value. Don't worry, you can also edit that later. We also allow essay question types and a few other types of questions. The only thing with essay questions is there is no correct answer because there's no way for anyone to automatically grade that. I'm sorry, but we couldn't take that off your hands. You still have to read those responses and grade them yourself. So that's a highlight of some of the more popular ways to format Word files. Now I'm going to go back into the Respondus 4 application, open that import wizard again, and I picked Word as my file type, browse to the file, which is right here on my desktop. Then what it's asking me, as I mentioned earlier in the second step, is where do I want these questions in the Word document to go? I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it training and today's date, just so we can keep track of it. And then I click preview. Now what Respondus 4 is doing for you now is it's basically proofreading, in a way, your Word document. It's making sure that it was formatted correctly for ease of import. And as you can see, mine is. It better have been, right? My job is to show you how this works. I better do it right. But if it isn't, let's say I forgot to indicate a correct answer choice or I didn't number a question, it's going to say, wait, there's something wrong here. You can see what the wrong thing is, and then you can go back out to the Word document before you actually complete the import. So you don't have to try to find these errors later. You can fix them before you even do the import. And that makes this all very simple too. Now, obviously, I knew what I was doing. I did my importing correctly. This doesn't take very long, especially if you have something like a 100 question all multiple choice type of quiz. You can imagine how easily and quickly this can go. You can even use the auto formatting in Word to do your numbering and lettering for you. That makes things really simple. But I would say, for most people who've never done this before, you're going to do this a couple times. You're going to make a couple of mistakes before you get the hang of it. But then it is like learning another language. You don't forget it. So I'm going to click Finish. And what this has now done, it has brought every one of the quiz questions that was in my Word document into Respondus 4. So now I have what's called a Respondus file, which is basically my quiz. So it's all the questions here. And you can see I have now automatically moved over to the Edit tab, which is where my quiz questions live. Down here at the bottom is the question list. And if I click on Expanded View, I only have 11 questions, but again, you can imagine if I've got hundreds of questions here. In the expanded view, you can sort without changing the order of the questions in the quiz itself. You can edit things very quickly. So let's say I want to make a few of these questions worth a little bit more. I can edit those things here. I can also use this, preview button to preview what the question would look like. Or I can use this menu to do a few other things, move them around, delete them. And if I click Edit, what's going to happen, I'm going to pick a multiple choice question to edit, is it will bring me into the top part of the Edit tab, which are the question types. This list right here on my Edit tab is a parallel to the types of questions you have available in Canvas. Now, one thing I neglected to point out when we were back on the Start tab is I had opened Respondus 4 and I had already selected Canvas as the personality I'm working with. That's because I know you all use Canvas, but there are other choices here. So if at some point your institution switches from Canvas to another LMS, as long as it's in this list, you can publish to it from Respondus 4. Or if you came to Ivy Tech teaching somewhere else and you want to bring your questions with you, you can bring them from another LMS into Respondus 4 and then publish them to Canvas. So it makes keeping your content with you really easy. But back here on the Edit tab, remember that Respondus 4 can't do anything that Canvas can't. It's a subset of what you have available in your learning system. So these are the question types and the names match of what's available in Canvas. You can see there's quite a few. Now, when you're on the Edit tab and you see the content in the question, you're seeing what you might expect, the wording for the question, the different answer choices. You can also add things like correct or incorrect feedback, general feedback on the question itself. Sometimes it even lets you put in feedback for the different answer choices for each one. Why'd you pick that one? That kind of thing. Here's where you select the correct answer and add point values or edit them if you want to. Now, another thing you can do here is you can do some really rich editing within all of these templates. So, for example, if I wanted to include an essay question in which I had a pretty long prompt, and in that prompt I wanted to include an image, a chart, a table, things like that, what you have across the top, and I'm actually going to pull up the one we have already, so I just don't have to type in text in front of you. What we have up here at the top is some formatting, just kind of like what you would see in a word processing document. So I can, unbold this or italicize it or change it if I wanted to. I can also embed things like equations, math and science equations. I can code it if I wanted to use HTML. Don't know a ton of people that like to do this, but some do. But one thing that is really useful and that often works far better than trying to do this yourselves in your learning system is this media wizard. So this little media button helps you embed or connect or link to media files very easily. And those media files can include a lot of different file types, images, audio or video, even PDFs. So if I wanted to embed an image here in my quiz question, I don't have to worry about how big it's going to be or trying to format it. Maybe I just go to where do I have some images here? What did I do with my images? Sorry, I'm trying to find one. Here's one. I can, just quickly upload this image. I can put alt text, which is what your mouse sees when you hover over it. It's also what screen readers see. And when I click next, what it's going to do is right size it for me. So if this image was huge, it will scale it down so it fits into the screen that the student is seeing when they're taking the test. I could also manually scale it if I wanted it to be a little bit smaller. When I click finish, when I've added a piece of media, whether that's an image or another type of file, I'll see this little camera icon here when I'm editing, but when I preview, I'm going to see the actual image. So this one's pretty big. I mean, maybe when I look at this, I say, nah, I think I can go back and trim it down even further. So let me save those changes. Now, the other thing that you'll see on the Edit tab, and we'll do a little bit more of this when we'll go back to the Start tab, is you have the ability to bring in questions from other sources right from here. So we just did an import from a Word document, but if I wanted to bring in some questions from another Respondus file, maybe there's one, let's find one that I used for Canvas that I used in another course. I'm like, oh, I really like that question. I can do that very easily. So here are a couple of question types I'm going to grab and add to the end of my list because I've already used Respondus, I already have a couple files, and I just want to reuse a couple questions. I also can bring in content from the Test Bank Network. Now, this is a link to our Test Bank Network wizard, but I'll go back to the Start tab. We also have a link to the same wizard right here on the Start tab. So you don't have to start with a Respondus file. You can start with the Test Bank and go from there. Now, I'll walk through how that works. But I also want to go back to the Edit tab really quickly just to point out that, what I'm doing now is I'm authoring, right? I'm writing my test questions. And in fact, what I'm going to eventually do is I'm going to apply some settings to those test questions, and then I'm going to publish those into Canvas. So I'll do that at the very end once we've added a bunch of content. But, imagine, if you will, if I just had that one Word document with a couple hundred questions in it, I did a quick import, and then I can go quickly publish them. This isn't going to take 45 minutes to do. It's going to take like 5. So it's really easy and really fast to take content you already have. So we saw Word. We also saw, and you certainly can if you wanted to, the ability to just use these templates to create questions from scratch one at a time. If that's how you want to work, or if you have questions in another format that you want to copy and paste into here, that's fine too. You can do this a lot of different ways. And you can combine content from different sources into one Respondus file, all while working again in this offline environment. So again, I'm going to go back to the Start tab, and I'm going to add a few more questions, but this time from my test bank. So what the test bank network is, and I'll open the wizard because it'll help explain. It is partnerships between Respondus and a couple of dozen, I think maybe we're up to like 30 or 40 different publishers. So, you know, the companies that write your books, textbooks. If you're using a textbook that is in our test bank network, and there are something like 8,000 titles in there now, you can request the test questions written for that book through the test bank network for free. If you're using Respondus 4.0 and you've adopted that book in your class, this is a free service. So the first thing you do in the wizard is you look for the book. The first option here says search for a test bank. Now, if I click next, what this is going to do is actually take me out to the Respondus website. And you're welcome to do this right now if you want to look for your book now and follow along. In fact, I'll go to the Respondus homepage, which is respondus.com, click on Test Bank Network, and then there's that big bluish greenish button right there that says search for test banks. That's the same place we wind up when we clicked on the link from within Respondus 4. It's this search feature. Now what you're going to do here is you're looking for your book. So you might put in the title, or if you know the author's name, keywords, you know, I teach geography, maybe that's the keyword I'm going to use. You can also look by publisher. You know, I know it's a geography book and Cengage publishes it, so that's all I want to see in my results. And you can also use this list to take a quick peek at how many different publishers we work with. And then when you click search, what you're going to get is a list of all the texts that meet your criteria. And from here, you click the link under the title, and it will give you more details about the book. You can confirm things like this is the edition I want, this is a link to the publisher's website. But more importantly, from this page, we have the request form. So this is really important if you're thinking of using test banks. Remember this part. You actually have to request the test bank from the publisher. Respondus doesn't house them. We don't own that content. The publishers do. Cengage, McGraw-Hill, Pearson, etc. So when you submit this form, which is basically your contact information, where you teach, how big is your class, what, you know, things like that, the publisher is the one who's going to say, ah, yes, Ari really is an instructor at such and such institution. She's not a student looking for answer keys. And they're going to approve the request. So give yourself a couple days to do this. You know, the worst thing you can do is be writing your final exam you're going to give tomorrow and request the test bank this morning and expect it tonight. That's not going to happen. Although I will say some publishing partners are faster than others. I'm not naming names, but some are really quick and some just take a little bit more time. We say generally 3 to 5 business days. It will be less than that, but that's the window you'll want to give yourself. But anyway, once you fill out this form and submit your request, what's going to happen then is you're going to get an email. And in that email, you're going to get instructions for using the test bank, and as this second step in the wizard indicates, a file code and a password. So when you go to the second step in the Respondus Test Bank Network wizard that's in the Respondus 4 application, you're going to enter that file code and password right here. So this is your access to that test bank that came from the publisher. Now, I already did that. I already have one set up right here. So what happens when you submit that file code and password is 2 things. One, the test bank gets linked to your copy of Respondus 4. And 2, the entire test bank gets downloaded in the background and saved locally. So you can access it at any time. You don't have to be online. When you do access it, this is what you're going to see. Choose your title. Choose the chapter or file. Sometimes it's called file. And then you get to see all the test questions. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Now, this particular chapter that was 1 of 10 in this particular book has over 110 questions. So there's a lot of content to work with here. You may already know right away which questions you want to use. You may need to look through them, in which case from here you can preview those items individually. You also can use some other information to decide what types of questions you want to use. Maybe, multiple choice is not the question type you want. You're going to look for another question type. Maybe you want to make sure that you cover a specific topic. You're only giving a test on, in this example, one country. So you can search by keyword for the questions that have that topic in them. The other thing you can do, let me go back to that test bank again. How I got out of there. The other thing you can do is you can use these indicators to make a few more judgments about the question types. The Respondus Test Bank Network includes a popularity indicator, which tells you how often has this question been used by other faculty like yourselves. And it also has a flagging feature. So the popularity indicator might be, it could either be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. If some question's really popular, maybe that means it's a great question to use. Maybe it means it's too obvious and everybody's using it. Maybe your students have seen it before. A flag indicates there might be some caution before you use that item. And in fact, you can add flags yourselves because this is sort of a community sourced piece of information. Let me actually find an example of a flag. Here's one. So for example, I could add a flag to an item that I think is worded wrong or is factually incorrect. Maybe it's out of date. My students didn't understand this question, so maybe I flag it. And anyone else using this test bank can see this flag, so I'm warning my colleagues, but also the publishers see this flag. So they can then maybe make some improvements in the next edition of the book. You can, look through these items. You can pick the questions you want and very quickly add them to the list of questions in your Respondus file. I also can use a feature called automatic selection, which lets me let Respondus take over picking the questions. It's kind of like randomizing questions. So the automatic selection, as you can see, what it's going to do is it'll list the number of questions in the test bank by question type. And then, how many do I want? 10 multiple choice questions, 5 points per question. So I can enter that information right here. And Respondus 4 will automatically select those items for me. And I can either include or exclude the items that have already been flagged. And that makes it really easy to quickly create a little pop quiz or, pull together a question bank that I then publish into Canvas and then I use to create my actual test. You can do a lot of different things with this. So now I successfully copied those 10 items. When I close this, what I'm seeing here is actually the entire question list for my whole Respondus file. So we started off questions 1 through 11, I imported from Word. I handpicked a couple, and then I had Respondus, the Test Bank Network wizard, automatically pick a couple. So, I did this a lot of different ways. Now, when I get here, I can add more test bank questions either from a different chapter or even another book. So here's a great way to combine multiple sources. Or when I click finish, I'm going back into Respondus and I'm going to be able to look at all my test questions again. Now, let's assume that we have all of our test questions, collected together, written the way we want. I've proofread them. What I do next, the next step, and as we're moving left to right and the tabs across the top, is I could then determine the settings for this quiz. Now, a quick word about this. Some instructors like to do this all in Respondus 4. They create everything, soup to nuts, about the entire test in Respondus 4. But you don't have to do that. You can just publish the content and then apply the settings in Canvas. Because remember, ultimately, we are publishing this content to your Canvas course. So if you want to do it this way, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter. But I'll just quickly show you, the settings that are available here are going to mirror what's available in Canvas. Because again, we can't do anything Canvas can't do. Canvas is ultimately the forum, the platform that is delivering the test to your students. So what you're seeing here, your ability to do things like shuffle your answer choices, allow multiple attempts, give a due date. There was a question grouping. Oops, I'm not going to allow multiple attempts. There's a question grouping, which is being able to, put 100 questions in a test and 1 through 10, 11 through 20, and only pick 2 questions from each group. So it's a way of randomizing the questions so that different students see different question types. This is a feature in Canvas. This is not special to Respondus. You already have this available. It's just you could do it here if you find this easier to work with. You also can set up default settings. And I think this is worth mentioning because a lot of people miss this. Up here in the File Edit menu in Respondus 4, there is a feature called Preferences. And this gives you the ability to, let's say, set a default point value for every question that you create going forward, whether you've imported that, pulled it from a test bank, or written it yourself. It also allows you to do things like scale, how you format things, or convert things from one learning system to another. So there's a lot of different features in here that I call these like the advanced features, but I think the point value one is the most valuable because if people ask all the time, well, I don't want every question to be only worth 1 point. I want my default point value to be 5, but it does allow me to change that later. If I see an individual question that I want worth more or less than 5, I can always do that manually from the Edit tab or from the question itself. So those are the settings for the quiz. And again, remember, you can ignore this completely, or you can do it in Canvas, or you can do it all here. But then the very last thing we're going to do, and really the second to last, is we're going to preview and publish the file. And that's what this last tab is called. Preview the file means exactly what it says. I'm going to look at every question and make sure it gets represented properly. Remember, these are the ones that we imported from Word here at the top. Once we get to question 11, 12, these are the ones we pulled out of the test bank. They all look pretty good to me. If, though, I do see an error or I see something I don't want to include, I can click Modify Item right from the preview screen, and that question will be pulled right up into the Edit tab for me to edit. So let's say I think this number was wrong. It should be 121 miles. I can save that change and then go back to previewing it. Once I've previewed it, and we highly recommend that, it's like proofreading your work, then we publish it. Now this is worth explaining in a little bit of detail. What we're doing when we publish is we're taking all the content, all the images, all the links, all the formatting, and all the settings, if you used Respondus 4 to apply your settings, like due dates and time limits and things like that, packaging it all up and putting it in your Canvas course. You can do this a couple different ways. You can publish this one quiz file to one course, or you can do something called batch publish. A lot of you that teach multiple sections of the same content will find this useful. I could publish this to 3 courses at once, or maybe you're an instructional designer and you're helping support faculty and you want to publish this to everybody who's teaching the same course. I'm just going to do it to one though. Then this information in the Publish Wizard is some technical stuff about your Canvas learning management system. Now, one thing I will point out, because Ivy Tech is a campus-wide licensee of Respondus 4, you have the ability to use something called pre-configured server settings, and I hope you are using it. It is something that the license administrator sets up, so this data gets automatically populated for you. You don't have to enter it yourself. You'll know you're using it if the server name says PSS in it. That stands for pre-configured server settings. Really what it means is you don't have to add this technical stuff yourself. Now, I say technical stuff. It's really just a bunch of links that you copy from various places within Canvas. We do the heavy lifting with the technical side, but this is a step that everybody has to do at least once. You're either going to pull these settings down because they've been pre-configured for you, or you're going to enter them manually. But what it does is it tells Respondus where to publish this content, because we need to know what course to go into, what Canvas server to go into, what institution are you from, and so on. And I already have this set up, so when I click Next, now what I'm seeing is the ability to select, do I want this to be a graded quiz? Maybe I want to dump these questions into a question bank, and then I'll pull them out later and create my quizzes in my courses. I want to create a new file, or I can replace a file that's already there. Maybe I've just published something and I made a mistake and I want to overwrite it. Now I'm going to apply the settings because we created the settings in Respondus, but I don't have to do that. And when I click Next, it's then going to ask me, what course do you want to put this in? Because I teach a lot of different courses. So here's my geography course. I'm going to dump this right in there. And by the way, this list of courses will only be the courses that your instructor login has access to. So it's not every course at the entire institution. It's only the courses that you teach or that you help teach or manage. And now what Respondus 4 is doing is it's packing up all that stuff, all of the content, all the formatting, if you embedded images, all the settings, and it's publishing it to my Canvas course. And it took me longer to explain that than it did to actually publish it. And this is a fairly rich file. I had a bunch of images and things linked in it, although there were only about 30 questions or so. So now I get a publish complete successfully message. And to show you what that is going to look like, I'm going to pop on over into Canvas, log in as with my instructor account here. And in the quizzes area of my geography course, which is where I just published this, here is the file we just put together and published here. So you can see I have all of those questions, all of the formatting, the pictures, all that good stuff that was in the Word document. If I keep going down, I'll see the ones that I imported or brought in from test banks. Now, this is the quiz in Canvas. I didn't make it available yet, but I could. From here, I could do whatever I would normally do. I can update the settings. I can publish it so my students can take the test. I can work with it a little bit more here if I wanted to. But it makes taking your content from all these different sources, working with that content, editing it, making changes, combining content, publishing it to Canvas really quick and really easy. The very last thing to mention is the very last thing in the order of buttons on all these pages is the one surprisingly popular feature, and I hear this, I've been in Respondus for 10 years, and even though the adoption of giving online tests and learning management systems has grown so much in that time, the print feature in Respondus is still probably in the top 5 popular features. This gives you the ability to print a test out of Respondus 4 that is oftentimes far easier, far better formatted than any learning management system could do, because that's not what learning management systems are supposed to do. They're supposed to give everything online. But if you might have a legitimate reason to give a paper-based exam, a time and a half, or a makeup test, or maybe you just want paper files of your exams and answer keys, or an answer key, you can do that from here. So if you select print options, it will print this test file that we just worked on, and you can edit the headings, you can group questions, you can randomize questions, you can only print some of them, and you can even, if you don't want to print it, save to a Word document or a text file. If you wanted to send your Respondus document and go the other direction from Respondus to Word, you can do that too. All right, so I know I covered a lot, and I know I covered it quickly. I'm sure there are questions. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to moderate or if you want me to just read them out loud. I'm happy to do that and cover any other features I didn't cover.
Yeah, I think you did a great job covering everything. I don't see any questions currently, so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type those in right now. We'll give everybody a minute or two here just to type in if you have anything. Definitely want to thank Ari for her time. Again, I've been with Ivy Tech for 10 years, and she's been with Respondus for 10 years, so I know our paths have crossed through here, so I do appreciate Ari and all that she does for us, and being able to record a meeting like this or a webinar and have just training on file, I think is always a good idea, especially just hearing the latest and greatest. So it does look like we have a couple questions that have popped in here, and you can, if you want to read them, or I can read them. Ari, it's up to you.
You know what? I don't think I'm seeing them, so maybe they're just not.
Okay. Oh, it's okay.
If you don't mind.
It's actually its own, yeah, it's actually its own little window there. So first question is, how do we go about getting Respondus on our Office PC software request? That would be a question that I could handle. So basically, the best way for me to explain what the process for Respondus, both Respondus 4.0 and then Lockdown Browser, is it's two things. So first of all, I want to point everybody to the Faculty Resource Center, so the FRC. That's where all our faculty and staff get kind of the inside information. And because with Respondus, both with 4.0 and then with Lockdown Browser, We do things a little bit different than our usual way of doing things with other vendors. So they have they have given us our own unique URL. So for anything that has to do with 4.0, you basically go to our folder, the content folder for Respondus, and all that information will be there as far as the licensing and everything that's privy to Ivy Tech users only. So you can go there, it's all direct, and that's from, I believe that's Lewis. So that's where you go for that information. And then as far as Lockdown Browser, that is actually, it's kind of the same thing. So there is a built-in LTI that builds right into Canvas, and that's kind of how we utilize Lockdown Browser. So they're both managed a little bit differently, and like I said, it's different from other vendors that we deal with, but we try to put all the latest and greatest information. And for instance, our password will change on a annual basis, so we put all that information in there. Second question is, can you take a test from Canvas, bring it into Respondus, and then print it out? That is from Julia.
Unfortunately, there is not a very straightforward way to do that. We don't have a retrieval feature from Canvas. In fact, that's something we really want. We've been able to build it for other learning management systems, but I think Instructure needs to do something to make that happen. What I think some other folks have been able to do is if there's a way to export your quiz in a QTI format, if you're familiar with that, that's like it's like a generic format for test question content. I don't know if there's other ways to export quizzes out of Canvas, if you can get it in a Word document or something like that. But then again, if you can get it in a Word document, you don't really need the Respondus part. So there isn't really a quick and easy way to do that. There's probably a couple of workarounds to do that, but I'd have to give you some more detailed instructions.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any more questions? Those are the only 2 questions that I saw. So feel free to type away if you do have any questions now, or forever hold your peace. And again, I just want to thank Ari again for her time. We will be, just so you know, those of you that are in this session and want to join us for the next session, we're going to go ahead and end this recording here in just a minute, and then we'll start up right at 1 for Respondus Lockdown Browser. And again, we'll be not only recording these, but I'll be posting these. I know one place that I will put them will be in that Respondus folder, so that you can just click on the link and be able to see this recording at any time. And then we also may put those in another place within our YouTube, our Ivy Tech YouTube account or channel. So you will have access to be able to see this, or tell your other faculty, other staff members about this, about Respondus, about Lockdown Browser, and that, we want to get the information out there. That's the most important thing. And again, I'll just use this opportunity to plug the FRC, the Faculty Resource Center. It's a great place to go to get all the latest and greatest information and all those things that you have to have, those tools kind of on your tool belt that you need to utilize all the tools that we have and all the things that we have that integrate directly into Canvas. So I don't see any other questions at this time. So what we'll go ahead and do is let's go ahead and end this recording right now. So again, I want to thank Ari Sowers, Director of Trainings for Respondus, for all her help in bringing us this webinar on how faculty can use Respondus 4.0 to create exams. So thank you so much, Ari. Thank you for everyone that had the time that they took to be with us for the last 45 minutes. We appreciate that. And again, look for this recording in the future, and we'll get going with Respondus Lockdown Browser webinar here in just about 15 minutes. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.